In Focus is powered in part by Delta Dental of Colorado, improving the oral health of the communities we serve. deltadentalco.com.
Welcome to In Focus with Eden Lane.
Tonight we return to Denver Center Theater Company's Colorado New Play Summit. We meet two more of the playwrights that were selected for production from this year's summit. Later we'll meet Trieschmann, who wrote The Most Deserving. A small-town arts council struggles with a $20,000 award. It was one of the most quoted readings of the weekend. But we'll begin with a playwright familiar to Denver Center Theater Company audiences, and her play, Just Like Us, an adaptation of a book by Colorado's own Helen Thorpe, following two Latina girls in Denver, two who are documented, two who are not. Here's a brief look at rehearsal.
A few years ago, I had the honor of meeting 4 young women, seniors in high school in Denver, Colorado. Maricela. Yadira. Epa! Woo! Clara. Orale! And Elisa.
4 girls in fabulous prom dresses.
They have been friends since middle school. They know almost everything about one another. All 4 girls come from families that emigrated from Mexico, and each has at least one parent who crossed the border without a legal entry visa.
Oh, that's Helen.
Helen Thorpe, she's a reporter. She's married to John Hickenlooper.
Hickenlooper.
Aha, him. He owns that bar and those restaurants.
Well, those are under a blind trust. John no longer manages them.
John Hickenlooper is in the government now.
My husband, John, a moderate Democrat, became the mayor of Denver in 2003.
Helen is writing a book.
A book about us.
A book about you. Who's going to read that?
Now my conversation with the playwright, Karen Zacarias. So we've just left the last reading of the Colorado New Play Summit, which happened to have been yours.
Yes, absolutely.
How did that feel?
It was very exciting. It was a great weekend of really diverse, interesting, well-developed, ambitious work, and it was really nice to be a part of it and be, I guess, the big exclamation part or the period at the end. So
I think exclamation point is more like it.
Okay,
it was
good.
definitely an exclamation point.
Great.
So what was it like for you to tackle this material that is so personal to Coloradans, dealing with people we all know,
Yes.
our neighbors, and such an emotional issue? What was it like for you to take that book and adapt it for the stage?
Well, it was a feat. This is based on the book Just Like Us by Helen Thorpe, and it's a policy book, a memoir. It is dense, it has backstory, it has 1 million characters, it has a personal connection, but it mostly focuses on the life of 4 Colorado girls, Mexican immigrants. 2 are here with papers and 2 who are here without papers, and how policy and the national discourse on immigration affects them personally, against the backdrop of the murder of Officer Donnie Young, which happened here in Denver. So after I read the book, which I found very moving and very complex and very dense, I cried for 2 days because I did not know how you take that and compress all that information and complexity and characters and truth, because all of this is based on the truth.
And dramatize it so that...
Dramatize it into a 2-hour play, because immigration is a really complex issue. There's a lot of legal terminology, there's a lot of misunderstanding. So the play has to be first engaging, second informative, and hopefully by the end, transformative. And that's very hard and ambitious to try to do.
The other thing is that these are people that
that we know. These are your neighbors.
Yes, I got to know them as my neighbors after a while from coming here. I've been here so often, I feel like the Denver Center is a second home to me, theatrically, and my husband is from Colorado. So I have a lot of connections to it, but I'm a Mexican immigrant myself. And so I brought a lot of my personal story to it. And yesterday at the public reading, we had the real people in the audience. We had Helen Thorpe, we had the girls, we had Kelly Young,
What
the
did that
widow
feel
Donna
like?
Young. It felt like it became more than a play or entertainment. It was the whole time, it's about, this is really about real life, that these are people, there's 11 million people who are here illegally or more, who this affects them on every day. And then there's the employers and people who work beside them. And there's a lot of heated discussion about what that means about our nation and what that means for the future. And that's what the play is trying to tackle. There's not one easy answer.
How did you decide that this was going to be the piece that you wanted to work on, or was this a commission for you?
This was a commission. Kent Thompson, the artistic director of the Denver Center, called me up. I did the play Mariela in the Desert here, which is set in Mexico, and he thought it would be very appropriate, since the book was written by a Denverite who's not a Mexican immigrant, it's by Helen Thorpe, to have the perspective of somebody who had been through it as writing the play. And I was very excited. And then I read the book and I was like, wow, this is an intense book. There's so much in it. How are we going to distill the essence and make that into a dramatic piece of work?
So where did you start?
The biggest thing was I had to ask Helen Thorpe, who is a shy, serious person, if she minded becoming a character on stage, because that was the only way I could see her navigating all of those worlds and her being our bridge point into the story. And she fortunately agreed. I don't think there would be a way of really putting that particular book on stage without her voice, because she has a journey too. All the characters have a journey in the play.
Since it's an intimate topic for you, and you have a relationship with this company already.
Yes.
And everybody loved Mariela in the Desert. So
thank you.
That's a lot to live up to.
Yes.
How did you begin?
Helen had some very good advice. She said, don't forget, don't lose the girls. And I took that advice to heart, because those girls are the heart and the blood and the irony of the whole story. So as we go into philosophy and Congress and to court cases, we never
into
class, we never lose focus about what that means on a personal level to those 4 girls.
Not what was the biggest surprise from the book, but what was the biggest surprise in dramatizing that material that really was so unexpected? What did you learn doing this?
I learned that you can break every playwriting rule in the book and still make a play. And so that was it. I was hearing my teachers like, you can't have a narrator talk to the audience. You can't have philosophical information. You can't talk about statistics. And I said, but we have to. I think the play is about something bigger than entertainment. It's about a national discourse. So what I hope the play really starts when people leave the theater and they start a dialogue about what this means, because for things to change, voters need to be aware one way or the other and start really voicing their opinion and making changes for justice and for voice and for other ways. And so hopefully this play starts a dialogue, not just venting on both sides, but a real true dialogue about how we can try to reform things and make people who are already living here real part of our society.
Did you feel an obligation to try to present all of the points of view on this topic?
I think it's really important to point all the views, because
it's not journalism, so that's not necessarily a requirement.
Well, there's some journalism in it. I mean, Helen Thorpe is a journalist. I thought it was really important because the other point has some valid points to be addressed, and to not present that. The point is to just give the audience a banquet of information, and for them to really savor what really resonates. And my hope is that everybody, whether they're conservative or liberal, whether they're an immigrant or not, has a moment where they feel redeemed during the performance and a moment where they feel deeply challenged about some of their beliefs. Even Helen in the play turns around and is challenged by the girls, because if we dig deeper and deeper and deeper, both our resistance and our acceptance of things are based on things. So I hope what this provides is a morality check for all of us, no matter where we stand on the thing, because I don't know what the correct answer is.
Good theater does that, doesn't it? Good theater does that. Gives you a chance to check and to check your own point of view.
Check your own point of view and say, wow. So that's that people may change their mind, and some people might not.
After the public reading yesterday, when Helen and the girls were here, did you get a chance to talk to them afterwards?
Yes. They were extremely moved. They cried during most of the performance, but their biggest message was to say they really want high school girls to come and see that. They really want to be a message of hope, and to say that, they were able to make it, and hopefully the other girls will not feel as alone and give up and drop out. That was their biggest message. They really cared about the generation coming behind them. And these girls still don't have it easy, and they don't all have their papers. But they're thinking about other people. And we were all very moved by how, they're putting themselves a little bit at risk, exposing themselves, and they're being vulnerable by both being in the book and now in a play. But they were also thrilled. They felt their voice was heard really loudly for the first time in front of 400 people. And that is really special.
Every playwright that participates in an event like this hopes that their play is selected for full production. That's one measure of success.
Yes.
Is there any other way that you will measure whether this play is successful, aside from whether the Denver Center Theater Company produces it?
Yes, having those girls say that they felt validated, that their whole life of being underground, they suddenly had their voice heard as they wanted it to be heard, because in a book it's not the same thing, and they really connected with the actors playing them. That feels like the best kind of review a playwright could ever hope to get.
Well, I know since we literally just left the theater from your industry reading, that there must be energy vibrating through you, and I don't want to keep you from your celebration.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was an excellent interview. Your questions were so good.
Could you say that again, please?
Your questions were so good.
Thank you.
They were so, I really had to dig in and go, wow, why did I write this? Thank you. That was really illuminated me. I'm like, that's why I wrote it, so thank you.
Just Like Us was a natural choice for the Denver Center Theater Company. The play grapples with essential questions like who is an American, who gets to live in America, and what happens when we don't agree. Now a brief look at rehearsal for the comedy The Most Deserving.
Edie, you know how much I value Vernon's legacy, and I'm convinced that Rick...
Let's leave Vernon out of it, please.
But his legacy...
is my concern, not yours.
You know what struck me most when we visited Everett's studio?
The smell?
No. How well you articulated Everett's vision. The appendage represents God's omnipotent creative power. You seem to immediately connect with Everett's work.
Well, any fool can interpret a phallus, except Dwayne, apparently.
Now we'll learn more about The Most Deserving and the playwright, Karen Trieschmann.
Thanks for making time for me at the end of the summit, because we really wanted to find out a little bit more about your play, The Most Deserving.
Yes.
But before we talk about that play, how did you get connected with the summit?
Yes. Well, I won this New Voices Playwriting Award from the Inch Festival in Kansas, and as part of that award, they wanted to do a reading of a new play, and I said, well, I do have this play, The Most Deserving, let's do a reading, and the artistic director, Peter Ellenstein of the Inch Festival, asked me, well, what director do you most want to work with that you don't know? And I said, Kent Thompson. Because I knew that the Denver Center cared a lot about new playwriting and women's voices. And so Peter called Kent, and Kent said yes. And so I got to spend a couple of days with Kent last spring working on this play. And that was fantastic. I feel like we bonded and we had a good time together. And from that experience, they commissioned me to write a play, and then I guess they picked up this play obviously for the summit, which I was thrilled about.
Well, this play, for everyone who lives here, we have the Science and Cultural Facilities Tax District here, which means 7 counties have cultural councils, which sort of is kind of the topic of your play.
It is.
But yours has a different take on that. So tell me, did you ever serve on a sort of an arts council?
I haven't actually, I have to admit. I mean, I've certainly been on like committees, and my mother was on the Board of Education growing up. And certainly moving to, I live in a small town in western Kansas, I live in Hays, Kansas, and you hear funny stories.
Which we have to drive through on our way to Chicago.
Yes, you drive. In fact, the only time people ever visit me is when they're driving across country or driving between Kansas City and Denver, and then I get visitors. No one just wants to come to Hays, Kansas because it's Hays, Kansas, unfortunately. But it's a great place to live. And of course, the local paper is always full of sort of funny stories about the city council or, any sort of small committee, whether it's the arts or education or local politics. I think that those small organizations are always sort of ripe for humor.
Oh, yes. And you give us this delicious, dishy look behind the scenes. So how did these characters come to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, comedy, the way to mine comedy is to find characters who care deeply about very small things, right?
Yes.
So that was part of it. I don't know that I don't know that I could write a comedy about an arts council that, had $10 million to distribute, because that's a lot of money. But you can really mine comedy out of someone who runs an arts council that's very small, where the stakes are really quite low when you look at the scene nationally. But
for some of the people they're impacting, the stakes are quite high.
Yes, it actually impacts people significantly. But all the baggage that people bring to those negotiations, again, like the tinier you can make, the more sort of petty you can make a lot of the focus, the more humor you will get. So really each of the characters sort of represents a different aspect of arts patronage. So you have the character who wants to be an artist but is terrible, and so that's his self-delusion. You have the money, you have the older woman who contributes a lot of her income to the arts, but might not be the most organized or efficient person, but she has a lot of power because she gives the money. You have the arts administrator who does all the work. In the play, I sent her up a little bit. She gets a lot of
just a little
bit. She gets the bunt of a lot of jokes. But at the end of the day,
she also has some really good zingers of her own.
She does, and she's the one who's keeping everything afloat at the end of the day, right? Yeah. I mean, she may be ruling it like a mini tyrant, but she is the person who's keeping the Arts Council afloat, and I think that's an interesting dynamic. And then you have the true artist, of course, in the play is an outsider artist who is controversial and mentally unstable, but at the end of the day is a true artist, and the kind of artist that gets left behind because, he can't write an effective grant proposal. He doesn't interview well. He doesn't have contacts. He didn't get an MFA from Yale.
Yeah, you even send up a little academic person.
Yes, and then you have the professor, the person who, the scholar, who both is interested in the genuine discovery of the artist, but also has their own agenda in terms of publishing and research. So I try to sort of hit each aspect of angle of arts patronage.
You really fleshed them out for us so well.
Thank you.
It was one of the most quotable plays of the weekend. I don't know if you noticed on social media, many people were quoting some of their favorite dishy lines from your show.
Good.
So how did you get this delicious dialogue?
Well, I will tell you that this is my first comedy.
Is it really?
It is, and comedy is so much harder than drama. It is so difficult because in some ways comedy has to be very rigorously structured, so for all the sort of jokes to pay off, especially in this sort of academic farce, which is what the play is at the end, where all the big reveals are made and everything, is just destroyed right and left and everyone's delusions are popped. So it has to be meticulously structured, but yet you have to be in tune with this like crazy, zany, unconscious part of your brain that can come up with absurd ideas. So it's a very difficult balance, and it's the hardest thing I've ever written. It was the most difficult thing to write.
Really? So having it and go through this process at the summit, how did that serve this piece for you?
Yes. Well, it was so important also with comedy to get in front of an audience. It's impossible. You can sort of make yourself crack up in your room, but you really don't know if it's funny until you do it in front of a crowd. So that was a huge thing. I mean, trying to define the comic tone, because this comedy is not like Neil Simon. It's not like Noel Coward. It's not I mean, I think it has some funny lines, but it's not like bada bing, bada boom comedy. There's sort of a level of, it's a comedy of anxiety, you know, and humiliation. I love Alan Ayckbourn, that wonderful English dramatist, and it's more in that tradition. And so you have to see if it works, you know, in front of an audience. And that was such a gift to hear their response.
Were there any big surprises of their responses?
That's a great question. It is very interesting. We had 2 readings.
One for the public and one for the industry.
Yes, and our first reading actually didn't go so well because the timing of just the tone of the humor we hadn't quite found in front of an audience. So it was very interesting to see, even in the first reading, how it grew from the first act to the second act. So really by the second act, the play was cooking. And then by the time we got to the second reading, we started off, you know, the performance with the right tone, and it was just fantastic throughout. So that's very interesting, just trying to discover tone, comic tone in front of an audience.
Yeah.
It requires some steps.
So of course, every playwright that participates in a summit like this or a new play festival hopes that theirs is one that's going to be selected.
I want to be the most deserving.
Yeah, that's right. And your cast was just delicious. You'd almost want to pick them up as a unit and keep them.
They were fantastic.
So if we do get to see your play take that next stage and be fully produced here, what is the first lesson you're going to take with you into that process?
Well, I think that my favorite kind of comedy is comedy that has pain underneath the humor. And so far I feel like we've just begun to tap that quality of humor, both
in bit of the pain.
Yeah, both in the text and performance. So I'd be looking in rehearsal and in rewrites to find that balance, so that you both can, you know, laugh with and at characters, but also hurt for them.
Yeah.
And finding that balance, I think, is really the direction that I want to go with the play, and you know, whether it's produced here or elsewhere, but continue that journey of finding that balance.
Well, congratulations
Thank
on what
you.
must feel like a successful weekend. As I said, everyone was quoting your play all weekend.
I mean, there's nothing better than hearing an audience laugh. Nothing.
And we certainly did laugh.
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, thank you.
The Most Deserving is a satirical, insightful look at how the arts collide with politics, self-interest, taste, relationships, egos, and gossip. 4 plays were selected for production from the Colorado New Play Summit by the Denver Center Theater Company. Details are available at denvercenter.org. Here's a brief look at 2 shows currently playing at the Denver Center. First up, a look at the ribald musical comedy playing at the Galleria, The Doyle and Debbie Show.
Give me those fat women in trailers, their husbands are in jail. Give me those fat women in trailers, their shoes come in the mail. Give me those fat women in trailers, they feed their children well. Beanie to the peanut butter cheese with wet bread, tater tots sucking on the soda pop. Fat women in trailers, they sure been good to me. Give me those fat women in trailers, always so they can see. Give me those fat women in trailers, stick to upholstery. I never got married, I don't see the need. Why buy the cow when the milk is free? And as I wander Miami to Nome, I keep on looking for that mobile home.
The Doyle and Debbie Show features all original songs as a loving parody of country music. And coming soon, the return of Spamalot. Spamalot plays at the Buell for one weekend, March 28th through the 30th. And for one night only at the Buell, Augustana Arts presents Calling All Dawns, a spectacular collaboration between Musica Sacra Chamber Orchestra, Fairview High School Music, and Kim Robards Dance. This special encore performance provides these young artists a chance to perform on the big stage, the Temple Buell Theater. Details are available on their webpage, augustanaarts.org.
That's all for this edition. Remember to join us on Facebook and Twitter. With all that Colorado has to offer, we're here to help you keep it in focus. Thanks for watching. Good night.